My name is David, and this is the day everything inside me changed. My 8-year-old daughter, Emma, was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life after a car accident. Machines were keeping her alive, and I was barely holding myself together. In the middle of that nightmare, my phone buzzed. It was my mom, Carol. She texted, "Bring cupcakes for your niece's school party tomorrow." I froze. I replied, "I can't. Emma's in the hospital on life support." Her answer came fast. "You always ruin everything with your selfish drama." Then my sister, Jennifer, chimed in. "Stop being so dramatic. Kids get hurt all the time." And my dad added, "Your niece's party is more important than your attention-seeking." I just stared at the screen, shaking. How could they say that when my daughter might not wake up? For years, I tried to please them. I worked hard, kept my head down, and raised Emma alone after her mom passed away. I thought maybe one day they'd see how much I loved her, how hard I was trying. But in that moment, every illusion I had about family shattered. My mother had always favored my sister's perfect family. Emma was never enough for her. I always thought that was just how moms were, flawed but still caring deep down. I was wrong. When Dr. Patel came into the room, I expected updates on Emma. But instead, he looked uncomfortable. "David," he said, "your mom called the nurse's station. She was asking some inappropriate questions about the cost of Emma's care. She also wanted to know if there's any life insurance policy in her name." My chest tightened. My own mother was thinking about money, while my daughter's life hung by a thread. My grief turned into something colder. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was clarity. I realized I had spent my entire life chasing approval from people who only cared about appearances and control. They mocked my job, pitted my struggles, and never once asked how I was really doing. Now they had crossed a line no one should ever cross. I stood by Emma's bedside and promised her something quietly. "You're going to make it," I whispered. "And when you do, they'll never hurt us again." The next morning, I stopped answering their calls. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped hoping for kindness from people who didn't have it in them. I started documenting everything, the texts, the calls, every cruel word. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I'd need it someday. For once, I wasn't reacting, I was planning. As I looked at Emma, her small hand resting in mine, a faint squeeze made me gasp. It was weak, but it was real. My little girl was still fighting. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and smiled through tears. They wanted me broken, but that moment reminded me, no one destroys a man who still has something pure left to fight for. Emma's condition was stable, but the fear still lingered. The machines were still there, the smell of disinfectant still burned my nose, but something inside me had changed. The numbness was gone. What replaced it wasn't grief, it was focus. Cold, steady focus. My family's cruelty had burned away every trace of weakness I had left. I knew now who they were, and I wasn't going to let them get away with what they did. That night, while sitting beside Emma's hospital bed, I opened my phone and started something I called the blueprint of betrayal. It wasn't revenge for the sake of anger, it was protection. Evidence. Every message, every cruel word they threw at me, I saved. I took screenshots of every text. My sister's words, my dad's sarcasm, my mother's manipulative messages. They were all pieces of a puzzle I intended to finish. I didn't want anyone to ever question what they had done to me and my daughter. A few days later, my sister called. Her tone was fake sweet at first, but it didn't take long for her real self to come out. She said, "Mom's just trying to be realistic, David. You've never been good with money. You can't blame her for worrying." I hit the record button on my phone and let her talk. Every word she said confirmed what I already knew. They didn't care about Emma. They cared about control, about image, about money. When I hung up, I saved the recording in my hidden folder. I labeled it Jennifer, Financial Talk. It felt strange, but it also gave me peace. I finally had proof of who they were. The next day, my dad texted, not to ask about Emma, but to ask when I could get back on my feet to help him fix his car. My hands shook as I typed nothing. I just took a screenshot and added it to the file. Each saved message became a small act of defiance. They had turned my pain into their gossip, but I was turning their cruelty into evidence. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Uncle Hank, my dad's brother. He had heard something about the accident and my mom's reaction. He said he couldn't believe what he was hearing. When I told him the full story, he went quiet for a few seconds, then said, "David, your mom's been like this for years. Always calculating, always chasing control. I knew she was bad, but this is something else. He offered his support and told me to call him if I ever needed help. It felt like someone finally saw through the lies. That night, I looked at the file I had built. It wasn't much yet, just screenshots, a recording, and a few notes, but it meant something. It meant I wasn't powerless anymore. For years, they made me feel small, as if I was just the broken son, the disappointment. But now, I was documenting every truth they wanted to hide. As the hospital lights dimmed, I whispered to Emma, "You keep fighting, baby. Daddy's handling the rest." She didn't move, but I could feel her warmth through her tiny hand. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man with a plan. They had taken enough from me. Now, it was my turn to take something back. The first time Emma's hand moved, it felt like the world had stopped. It was a weak squeeze, but it was enough to remind me that she was still fighting. That small moment gave me strength I didn't know I had left. I looked at her and made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't let the people who abandoned us walk away clean. They had turned their backs when we needed them most, and now they would see what that cost. I didn't want to explode in anger or start shouting matches. That's what they expected. Instead, I decided to be calm and precise. I opened my folder, the one where I had saved every cruel message, and found the perfect one. My sister's words, "Stop being so dramatic. Kids get hurt all the time." The same message that broke something inside me now became my first weapon. I sent a screenshot of it to Mr. Peterson, my sister Jennifer's father-in-law. He was an old-fashioned man who valued family more than anything, and he had always been kind to Emma. I knew how much he hated dishonesty and cruelty. It took less than a day for things to unravel. Mr. Peterson called me first. His voice was heavy with disappointment. "David, I had no idea your family said these things while your daughter was in the hospital," he said quietly. "That's not something a mother or sister should ever say." I didn't add anything. I just thanked him for listening. The rest, I knew, would happen on its own. Later that evening, Jennifer's husband showed up at the hospital. His face was pale, and his words were sharp. "What did you send to my dad?" he demanded. I looked him in the eye and said, "The truth." He didn't say anything after that, just walked away. I didn't need to see what would come next. I already knew. Over the next few days, whispers began to spread. Their perfect family image was cracking. Mr. Peterson confronted Jennifer and her husband in front of his business partners. People who once admired them started asking questions. Their friends began to distance themselves, and soon, even their church community heard about it. Jennifer, who loved being the center of attention, now avoided public gatherings. I heard from a mutual friend that she broke down crying, blaming me for ruining her reputation. But I didn't ruin it. She did that herself with her words. I didn't feel joy seeing her fall apart. What I felt was balance. For the first time, I didn't feel small or powerless. I didn't need revenge that screamed. I needed justice that whispered. One simple truth, shown to the right person, had done what years of arguments never could. That night, I sat beside Emma again. Her breathing was soft, steady. I took her hand and said quietly, "You're helping me fight, even without saying a word." She didn't move, but I could feel peace returning. This was only the beginning, but now I knew. Revenge didn't always need noise. Sometimes silence was louder. After everything that happened, I realized Emma needed more than just a father. She needed protection from the very people who called themselves family. My mother had already shown what she was capable of. The way she asked about money and insurance made me understand that her concern wasn't love. It was greed. I couldn't let her or anyone else like her come near my daughter again. Uncle Hank was the only person I trusted. When I told him what my mother had done, he didn't hesitate. "You can't leave any openings, David," he said. "People like her only stop when the law makes them." The next morning, he drove me to a lawyer's office. I was exhausted, but determined. The lawyer listened carefully as I explained everything: my family's messages, their behavior, and their attempts to interfere. He nodded slowly, then said, "We'll make sure they can't touch anything. Your daughter's care will be protected legally." We filed the papers that day. My medical power of attorney was updated, so that only I had the right to make decisions for Emma. My parents and sister were officially removed from any access to her medical information. The lawyer also arranged for the hospital to place a password on Emma's file, something only I and the staff could use. It was a small step, but it gave me peace. For the first time since the accident, I felt like I had control. A few days later, my phone rang. It was a nurse from the hospital. "Mr. Miller," she said carefully, Your mother called earlier. She was asking very personal questions and tried to pressure us into revealing details about Emma's condition. But we informed her that she's not authorized to receive any information. I could hear the tension in her voice. She wasn't happy about it. I thanked the nurse and hung up, knowing exactly what was coming next. That evening, I got the voicemail. My mother's voice was filled with anger. You've turned your back on your own family. You're poisoning Emma against us. You think you're smart, but you're just proving you don't need us. Don't come crying when you realize you've lost everything. I listened to every word, calm and silent, then saved the recording in my hidden folder. It joined the growing collection of messages that showed who they truly were. Uncle Hank came by later with coffee and said quietly, "You did the right thing, kid. Some battles aren't fought with fists, they're fought with paperwork." I smiled faintly. He was right. I didn't need to scream, argue, or explain myself anymore. The law was now my shield, and the truth was my weapon. That night, I sat beside Emma and watched her sleep. Her breathing was steady, her color better. I whispered, "No one will ever hurt you again. Not even the people who share our blood." It wasn't just a promise, it was a vow. The wall was built, and no one was getting through it. Smiling face with hard eyes. The storm began quietly, but it didn't stop once it started. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't have to. Truth spreads on its own, especially when people try so hard to hide behind fake smiles. Mr. Peterson, my sister's father-in-law, had seen enough. He was well respected in town, known for his honesty and his connections. Once he learned what Jennifer and my parents had said and done while Emma was in the hospital, he couldn't stay silent. He started talking to people he knew, people with influence, people who listened. The story moved faster than I expected. Within days, whispers started to reach the same community my parents loved so much. Their church friends, their neighbors, even the people at the local charity events began to hear about it. Everyone knew my mother as a kind, helpful woman who loved her family. But now they were hearing about her heartless words, the texts, and the way she treated her own son and granddaughter. The image she had built for years began to crack. My father, Walter, had his own downfall. He worked in a small local government office and had been expecting a promotion for months. He talked about it constantly, saying it would finally put our family back on top. But when the decision day came, someone else got the position. Word spread that a council member had raised concerns about his personal conduct and integrity. I didn't celebrate, but I won't lie, it felt like justice had quietly found its way to him. As for my mother, her world started to shrink fast. She was dropped from her favorite book club and removed from her charity committee. These were the things she lived for, the places where she could show off, gossip, and pretend to be better than everyone else. Suddenly, no one wanted her around. Her phone stopped ringing, and the people who used to flatter her now avoided her. It was strange watching it all happen from a distance. I didn't have to do anything but watch the truth expose her. Jennifer didn't escape either. Her husband's family pulled away from her completely. Their social circle turned cold, and she started realizing what it felt like to be isolated. She had always been the golden one, the daughter my parents bragged about. Now she was dealing with stares, judgment, and silence. Uncle Hank told me one evening, "You didn't destroy them, David. They did it to themselves. You just stopped covering for them." He was right. I wasn't out for revenge anymore. I just wanted peace and for Emma to grow up free from their poison. What happened to them was simply the result of their own choices. I visited Emma that night, her small body stronger, her breathing easier. I held her hand and said softly, "You didn't just survive, baby. You changed everything." The people who once looked down on us were now buried under their own lies, and I didn't even need to say a word. It had been weeks since I stopped all contact with my parents and sister. I thought the silence would keep them away, but I was wrong. My mother never accepted being ignored. One afternoon, while I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, she showed up without warning. The moment she walked in, I could see the anger on her face. She didn't care that it was a public place or that nurses and patients were nearby. She just wanted to create a scene. She started shouting before I could even stand. "You've turned this whole family against me," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "You've poisoned everyone with your lies, David. How could you do this to your own mother?" People in the lobby turned to stare. I felt embarrassed but stayed calm. I had learned that reacting only gave her more power. I took out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and pressed record without her noticing. I spoke slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Mom," I said quietly, Why did you ask the nurses about Emma's life insurance while she was still on life support? Her expression changed instantly. For a moment, she looked caught off guard, then her tone turned defensive. Someone has to be responsible, she snapped. You never think ahead, David. You've always been too emotional to make hard decisions. Her voice rose again. You don't understand how the world works. Money matters when things go wrong. Her words hit like knives, but I didn't let it show. I just kept the phone steady in my pocket, letting it capture every word. The people around us were now whispering, some shaking their heads. I didn't have to say anything more. She was exposing herself better than I ever could. After a few minutes, a hospital security guard came over and asked her to leave. She stormed out, muttering that I would regret turning my back on her. When the doors closed behind her, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. My hands trembled slightly as I stopped the recording and replayed it quietly through my earphones. Every word was clear, her anger, her tone, her twisted reasoning. It was proof, real and undeniable. I saved the file and uploaded a copy to a secure drive. I named it simply Confession. Later that night, Uncle Hank came to visit. I told him what happened and played a small part of the recording for him. He listened in silence, his face hardening with every second. That's it, he said finally. You don't need to argue or explain anymore. This is your shield. He was right. I didn't need to fight her with words anymore. When I went back to Emma's room, she was asleep, her chest rising and falling peacefully. I sat beside her and whispered, We're safe now, sweetheart. The storm had raged loud and cruel, but now I had something stronger than their lies, the truth captured in her own voice. Emma's recovery started slowly, but every small improvement gave David hope. He stayed by her side through the sleepless nights and long therapy sessions. Just when he began to believe the worst was behind them, he received a call from a hospital administrator that made his blood run cold. Carol had reached out to Emma's maternal grandparents, the same people she had spent years mocking for being uneducated and poor. Now she was pretending to care, suggesting they join forces to challenge David's custody and handle the financial matters from the accident. Her words made it clear she still saw Emma's tragedy as an opportunity for money and control. David didn't shout or argue this time. He was done playing the emotional games his parents loved. He quietly gathered every piece of proof: Carol's recorded confession, her threatening voicemails, her manipulative messages, and now the administrator's report. The evidence painted a picture of greed and cruelty, so clear that no one could deny it anymore. When the court day came, Carol and Walter walked in as if they still had power over him. Carol tried to look confident, but her eyes flickered with unease the moment she saw David's lawyer place a stack of documents and a USB drive on the table. The judge played the recording where Carol admitted she was thinking about Emma's life insurance while she lay on life support. Her voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Someone has to think about the money, she said. The words hit like a hammer. David didn't say much. He didn't need to. The judge's expression said it all. Disgust replaced formality. The judge turned to Carol and Walter and told them they were lucky the law couldn't punish moral failure. Then came the restraining order. No contact, no visits, no influence. They were cut off completely from David and Emma's lives. As they left the courtroom, Carol tried to speak, but David didn't look back. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, just relief. The people who should have been family had proven they were nothing more than poison. Now they could no longer reach him or hurt Emma. That evening, David sat by Emma's hospital bed, holding her hand. She smiled faintly in her sleep, unaware of the storm he had faced to protect her. For David, that small smile meant everything. He had lost his parents, but he had saved something far more important: peace. The final tie was cut, and for the first time in years, he could finally breathe again. Life finally began to calm down after years of chaos. With Carol and Walter gone from their lives, David felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. There were no more angry calls, no guilt trips, no manipulative words hanging over him. It was just him and Emma now, facing the world together. Every day he woke up early to drive her to physical therapy, cheering her on through every small step she took. Her determination amazed him. Though her body was weak, her spirit had grown stronger than ever. At the therapy center, David met Maria, a warm-hearted speech therapist who worked closely with Emma. She was patient, gentle, and had a way of bringing light into even the hardest days. Over time, Maria became more than just a therapist. She became a friend. She often stayed late after sessions, talking with David, helping him understand Emma's needs, and reminding him to take care of himself too. Her kindness reached places in his heart that had long been closed. Uncle Hank was still by their side, always ready with quiet wisdom and a calm presence. He and Maria's family began spending weekends together, sharing meals and laughter that didn't come with judgment or conditions. For the first time, David saw what a real family looked like, a family built on care, trust, and mutual respect, not control and power. Emma, surrounded by these new faces, started to smile more often. Her laughter, once lost to pain and silence, filled their small home again. David began to notice how much lighter life felt. The heavy shadow of his parents' manipulation had lifted. He no longer had to defend every choice or fear being judged for loving his daughter too much. Every small success in Emma's recovery felt like a personal victory against the darkness that once surrounded them. He finally started to believe that healing wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. As weeks turned into months, Maria and Emma developed a bond that felt like family. She celebrated Emma's progress with the same joy David did. Slowly, something new grew between David and Maria. Something built not from desperation, but understanding. He didn't rush it. For now, he was content to simply have peace, laughter, and genuine people around them. One evening, as Emma read a story aloud in her still-recovering voice, David looked around the room, Maria, Uncle Hank, and Emma all laughing together, and realized this was home. Not the house, not the walls, but the people inside. The pain of betrayal had burned everything false away, leaving room for something real. A new life was forming, one rooted in love, patience, and quiet strength. A full year passed before David finally saw how deeply the damage had spread. Life had moved forward for him and Emma, but for the rest of his family, it had started to fall apart piece by piece. News reached him quietly, through mutual acquaintances and the small-town gossip chain that never rested. His father, once so proud of his reputation in local government, was now barely holding on to his job. The promotion he once bragged about never came, and his colleagues had begun distancing themselves. People whispered behind his back, questioning his character and mocking his arrogance. Jennifer wasn't doing any better. Her marriage had cracked under the weight of her own choices. The scandal that started with her cruel words about Emma had followed her everywhere. Friends she used to show off to now avoided her at school events and social gatherings. Mr. Peterson, once her strongest supporter, refused to acknowledge her existence. Her husband couldn't stand the constant tension anymore. When she filed for divorce, it was clear that the perfect image she had worked so hard to maintain was gone for good. Carol's downfall was the most public. The woman who once demanded control over everything had lost all of it. She was banned from her book club, removed from every community circle she cared about, and ignored by the same people who once praised her. Her obsession with power and money had left her completely alone. No one trusted her, and no one wanted to be seen near her. For someone who had lived her whole life chasing approval, that isolation was the worst punishment of all. One afternoon, a letter arrived in David's mailbox. The handwriting was familiar, sharp and precise. It was from Carol. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he even wanted to read it. When he finally opened it, his heart grew heavy, but not with pain, just confirmation. It wasn't an apology or an admission of guilt. Instead, it was a cold list of complaints, accusing him of being ungrateful, weak, and selfish. She blamed him for everything that had happened, as if she still couldn't see her own reflection in the mess she'd created. David didn't respond. He simply folded the letter and slipped it into the same folder that had started it all, the blueprint of betrayal. It was full now, a silent record of everything they had done and everything he had survived. That night, as he watched Emma draw beside him, he realized that the real justice wasn't in their suffering, it was in his peace. He had built a life free of their poison. Their downfall was their own doing. The chapter had closed, and he felt no need to open it again. The morning of my daughter Emma's 10th birthday felt peaceful in a way I hadn't known for years. The sun was bright, the air warm, and the sound of her laughter filled the backyard. For the first time, it didn't feel like a place of pain or struggle. It felt like home. I stood by the grill, watching her run around with her friends, her joy shining brighter than anything I'd ever seen. Every giggle reminded me that we'd made it through the storm. Maria and Uncle Hank were helping set the table, moving around like family had always meant to. There were balloons tied to the fence, the smell of food in the air, and genuine smiles all around. No fake compliments, no forced politeness, just good people sharing a good day. We didn't need a crowd to prove anything. This small gathering meant more than any celebration I'd ever been part of. When it came time to blow out the candles, Emma closed her eyes, her hands clasped tight. I didn't ask what she wished for. I just watched, feeling my chest tighten with quiet pride. When she opened her eyes and blew out the candles, the cheers that followed were soft, real, and full of love. After everyone had eaten, I called Maria and Uncle Hank inside. Together, we baked a single batch of cupcakes, just one, covered with blue frosting, Emma's favorite color. They weren't for the guests or for show. They were for us. For the people who stood beside me when everything was falling apart. For the ones who helped me rebuild what my family tried to destroy. When the cupcakes were ready, Emma carried them out herself. Her smile was wide, and her little hands were steady. "This is for us," she said proudly. We each took one, and in that moment, it wasn't just dessert, it was a symbol. Every bite tasted like survival, like peace after years of pain. As I watched her eat and laugh, something inside me softened. I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't care about what my parents or sister were doing, or how far they had fallen. They had already lost the one thing that mattered, peace. And here I was, sitting under the golden evening sky, holding my daughter close, surrounded by love and laughter. Emma leaned against me, frosting on her cheek, and whispered, "This was the best birthday ever." I smiled and kissed her forehead, feeling tears sting my eyes. That was the moment I knew I had won. Not through anger, not through payback, but by living a quiet, happy life they could never touch. The best revenge wasn't loud. It was peace. It was this moment, right here, with my daughter safe, smiling, and free. Do you think I was right to walk away from my family and build a new life with Emma, or should I have tried to forgive them and start over? Tell me what you think in the comments. I'd really like to know your thoughts. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next one.